The first time Adrian Cole looked afraid, I was the woman holding the evidence that could destroy him. I said those words 12 months later, after I finally understood what fear looked like on a man who had built his entire life around never showing it. But that morning, seated beneath the white lights of a federal hearing room in downtown Manhattan, I mistook his silence for arrogance. The air conditioning was set too low. My fingers felt numb around the paper cup of water in front of me, and every small sound seemed unnaturally loud. The click of a reporter's pen, the soft cough of an attorney 3 seats away, the muted hum of cameras waiting behind the glass partition. Across the room, Adrian sat at the defense table in a charcoal suit that looked untouched by the chaos surrounding him. No loosened tie, no restless hands, no whispered panic. At 38, he had the kind of composure people paid consultants to imitate. Cole Meridian Group employed more than 40,000 people across the country. His name appeared on hospitals, university buildings, technology grants, and the side of a glass tower that rose 60 stories above Park Avenue. For 6 years, business magazines had called him disciplined, brilliant, untouchable. I was about to call him something else. Ms. Bennett, the committee counsel said, please state your position at Cole Meridian. I leaned toward the microphone. It smelled faintly of metal and disinfectant. Senior compliance auditor. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. And how long did you hold that position? 3 years. Adrian looked at me then. Not at the counsel. Not at the documents projected on the screen behind us. At me. His eyes were gray, darker than usual beneath the sterile lights. I had seen those eyes across conference tables, inside elevators, and once through the rain-streaked windows of his private office while he asked why I had stayed past midnight to review a set of shipping records no one else considered important. He had always watched people as if silence gave him more information than questions did. That morning was different. There was no calculation in his expression. There was something, almost like warning. I looked away first. Did you discover financial accounts that had not been disclosed to the board? The counsel asked. Yes. A folder waited beneath my right hand. For months of work. Thousands of transaction records. 12 accounts routed through shell companies, charitable foundations, security firms, and private medical trusts. Every path led back to one authorization code. AC Adrian Cole. Were those accounts approved by the defendant? The electronic signatures indicate they were. His attorney rose. Objection to characterization. Before the chairwoman could respond, Adrian lifted one hand. The gesture was small. His attorney stopped speaking immediately. Then Adrian leaned toward him and said something too quiet for the microphones. The attorney stared at him for a second, clearly dissatisfied, before sitting down. The counsel turned back to me. Ms. Bennett, did Mr. Cole ever explain the purpose of these accounts? I remembered standing in his office 2 weeks earlier, holding copies of the ledgers while evening traffic glittered far below us. I had asked him directly. He had taken the pages from my hand, studied the first transaction, and said only, some truths become dangerous when spoken too early. I had told him that sounded like a threat. He had looked almost tired when he answered. No, Claire. It is a deadline. At the time, I believed he was trying to intimidate me. No, I said into the microphone. He refused to explain them. A murmur moved through the observers. Adrian's face did not change. The counsel placed a document on the screen. Do you recognize this transfer? I did. $2 million moved through a subsidiary called Northstar Civic Partners, then divided among 6 private accounts. Yes. And whose authorization appears at the bottom? I swallowed. Adrian Cole's. His name seemed to alter the temperature in the room. Reporters began writing faster. The chairwoman adjusted her glasses. One of the board representatives lowered his eyes. Adrian remained still. That angered me more than denial would have. My father had spent his life believing companies should answer for the people they hurt. Daniel Bennett had worked as a financial controller before his death 12 years earlier, and he had taught me that numbers were never neutral. They could hide a theft. They could disguise a lie. Or they could tell the truth after everyone else had been paid to forget it. I had built my career around that lesson. I would not abandon it because the man across from me wore an expensive suit and knew how to make a room wait for him. Ms. Bennett, the counsel continued, in your professional opinion, were these accounts intentionally concealed? Adrian's attorney stood again. This time Adrian did not stop him. She cannot speculate about intent. I am asking about standard compliance practices. The chairwoman looked at me. You may answer within your expertise. My pulse beat against my throat. I opened the folder and found the marked page. The evidence was clear. Too clear. Yes, I said. They were structured to avoid normal oversight. The room went silent. I heard someone whisper Adrian's name behind me. He lowered his gaze for the first time that morning. Not in shame. Not in defeat. He looked at the watch on his left wrist, an old silver watch that seemed strangely modest against the tailored cuff of his shirt. His thumb brushed the scratched metal once. Then he looked back at me. Do you believe Mr. Cole was aware of that concealment? The counsel asked. I could have softened the answer. I could have said the record suggested it. I could have left space for uncertainty. Instead, I remembered his warning, his refusal, and the years of executives assuming that silence would protect them from consequence. Yes, I said. I believe he knew. Cameras flashed behind the glass. Adrian's attorney pushed back his chair. The board representative closed his folder. For one brief second, I thought Adrian might finally defend himself. He leaned toward the microphone. His voice was quiet, but every person in the room heard it. Let her finish. His attorney turned sharply. Adrian, she deserves the truth. The words landed harder than any denial could have. I stared at him, suddenly unable to understand why a man facing the loss of his company would sound less like my enemy and more like someone asking forgiveness. The hearing ended 43 minutes later. By noon, my testimony was on every financial news channel in the country. By 12:15, strangers were calling me brave. By 12:30, security officers were escorting me through a private hallway to avoid the reporters gathered outside. I should have felt relieved. Instead, Adrian's final words followed me through the marble corridor. She deserves the truth. In the underground parking garage, the air smelled of concrete and rainwater. My heels echoed between the rows of cars as I searched for my mother's blue Subaru. She had insisted on driving me to the hearing because she still believed 30-year-old daughters needed someone waiting after difficult mornings. But her parking space was empty. I called her once, then twice. Both calls went straight to voicemail. That was when I saw the envelope beneath the windshield wiper of my car. No stamp, no name, just thick cream paper, dry despite the water dripping from the ceiling. Inside were 12 photographs. My mother leaving a hospital 10 years earlier. My younger brother standing outside his high school graduation. Me unlocking my first apartment in Brooklyn. Different years, different places. Always the same dark sedan somewhere in the background. In the final photograph, Adrian stood outside a hospital room, younger, thinner, wearing no suit jacket. Through the glass behind him, I could see my mother asleep after the surgery our insurance had refused to cover. I had never met Adrian then. At least, I thought I hadn't. My hands began to shake as a small card slipped from the envelope and landed near my shoe. There were only 9 words written across it. Your family survived because he made sure they did. I called my mother again before I picked up the photographs. This time, she answered on the 4th ring. Claire, I am sorry. Your brother needed me. Her voice carried the familiar, breathless warmth that usually calmed me. It did not. Where are you? I asked. At Noah's apartment. His landlord called about a leak, and he panicked like the building was sinking. I closed my eyes and pressed one hand against the roof of my car. She was safe. My brother was safe. No one had taken her from the parking garage. But the photographs remained scattered at my feet, and relief only made room for a colder question. Who had been close enough to document 12 years of our lives? Mom, did you ever meet Adrian Cole? Silence followed. Not long. Maybe 2 seconds. Still, I heard it. The man from the hearing? She asked. Yes. No. Why would I? Her answer came too carefully. My mother had never been good at lying. When I was 16, she had tried to hide a surprise birthday dinner and accidentally asked whether I preferred chocolate cake before claiming she had not planned anything. I found a photograph of him outside your hospital room, I said. After your surgery. Another pause. Longer this time. Claire, this is not a conversation for a parking garage. Then tell me where he was. Come home tonight. Mom. Her voice softened. Please. The call ended before I could stop her. I stood beneath the concrete ceiling while water tapped steadily from a pipe somewhere behind me. The sound reminded me of a clock. One drop, then another. 12 years reduced to 12 photographs and 9 words written by someone who knew exactly where to place them. I gathered everything, locked myself inside the car, and studied each image again. The dates were printed in small white numbers along the lower edges. My mother leaving Mount Sinai after cardiac surgery. Noah shaking hands with his high school principal. Me carrying a cardboard box into my first apartment. Thanksgiving outside my aunt's house in Pennsylvania. My father's memorial service on the 5th anniversary of his death. Different cameras. Different distances. The same dark sedan appeared in 7 photographs. Sometimes parked across the street. Sometimes reflected in a storefront window. Always close enough to see us. I drove directly to Cole Meridian instead of going home. The tower looked different without Adrian's name glowing above the entrance. Protesters stood behind temporary barriers on Park Avenue, holding signs about corporate corruption. News vans occupied the curb. I entered through the employee garage and used my identification badge before anyone had time to deactivate it. The compliance floor was nearly empty. Legal teams had sealed most of Adrian's office, but my credentials still opened the audit archive. I turned on the lights and placed the photographs beside my computer. Then I began with the hospital. My mother's surgery had cost more than $180,000. Our insurance denied the specialist she needed, but 2 days later a patient assistance foundation approved the full amount. I had always believed a social worker had intervened. The foundation was called Harbor Light Medical Trust. Its registration records led to Northstar Civic Partners. Northstar led to a private holding company. The final authorization carried the same code I had shown the committee that morning. AC. I sat back slowly. The office around me felt too quiet. I searched Noah's scholarship next. He had received a 4-year award from the Franklin Education Initiative after our family missed the application deadline. At the time, the school claimed an anonymous donor had expanded the program. The Franklin Initiative was funded through a Cole Meridian subsidiary. Adrian had approved the grant 3 weeks before Noah's acceptance letter arrived. My hands moved faster. Our mortgage had nearly gone into foreclosure after my mother's surgery. The bank unexpectedly extended the loan and reduced the interest rate. A consulting firm called Bedford Asset Services had purchased the debt and renegotiated the terms. Bedford was controlled by Northstar. A pattern emerged so clearly that I wished I could stop seeing it. Every financial crisis my family had survived contained an invisible signature. Medical bills, tuition, housing, legal assistance after a contractor tried to place a false claim against my mother's property. Even the small business loan that kept my aunt's bakery open during a brutal winter had passed through a community program funded by Cole Meridian. Adrian had not simply watched us. He had built a quiet structure around our lives and hidden every beam. At 3:30 in the afternoon, I found the security invoices. They were buried inside 12 years of risk management reports, labeled as executive transportation assessments. The names had been replaced with identification numbers, but the addresses were ours. My mother's home, Noah's college dorm, my first apartment, my current building in Brooklyn. I remembered an evening 4 years earlier when a gray sedan had followed me for 6 blocks after I left work. I called the police from a grocery store. By the time an officer arrived, the sedan was gone. The following morning, a man wearing a navy coat stood across from my building. He had smiled when I looked at him, then walked away. I had forgotten his face until I opened the personnel file attached to the invoices. His name was Thomas Reed, former federal security specialist, employed by a private firm under contract with Northstar. I printed the page and searched the company directory. His current number appeared beside an emergency operations title. I called before fear could persuade me not to. He answered with no greeting. "This is Claire Bennett," I said. The line went silent. "I know who you are," he replied. His voice was calm, older, and entirely unsurprised. "Were you assigned to my family? That information is confidential. Adrian Cole is under federal investigation. Confidentiality is not going to protect anyone now. It was never meant to protect him." The sentence stopped me. "Then who was it meant to protect?" I asked. "You already know. I know he paid medical bills. I know he funded my brother's education. I know your people followed us. What I do not know is why." Thomas breathed out slowly. "Mr. Cole gave strict instructions that you were never to feel watched. He failed." "Yes," he said. "Today he did." I looked at the photograph of Adrian outside my mother's hospital room. He appeared no older than 26. His shoulders were tense. His head was bowed. On his wrist was the same scratched silver watch he had touched during my testimony. "When did this begin?" I asked. 12 years ago. After my father died?" Another silence. "No, Miss Bennett." His voice lowered. "It began the night before. My fingers tightened around the phone. Why? Because Adrian Cole did not create the arrangement. In the background, I heard a door close and the faint scrape of a chair. Your father did. The words stayed between us like a door I was afraid to open. Your father did. For several seconds, I heard nothing except the low hum of the archive lights and the pulse beating in my ears. My father died in a car accident, I said. He was not arranging private security contracts. Thomas Reed did not answer immediately. When he finally spoke, the careful distance in his voice was gone. Daniel Bennett knew the accident was coming. I stood so quickly that my chair rolled backward and struck a filing cabinet. That is not possible. He did not know the exact time or place. He knew someone had discovered what he was doing. I pressed the phone harder against my ear. What was he doing? Trying to expose Victor Hale. I knew the name. Everyone at Cole Meridian did. Victor had served as chairman of the board for almost 20 years. He was 61 now, silver-haired, polite, and famous for remembering the names of employees he had met only once. He had spoken at my father's memorial service. I could still picture him standing beside my mother beneath a gray October sky, one hand resting gently on her shoulder while he described Daniel as a man of rare integrity. Victor was my father's friend, I said. Victor was useful to your father, Thomas replied. That is not the same thing. He told me to leave the building and meet him somewhere public. 40 minutes later, I sat across from him in a diner near Grand Central Terminal. The place smelled like coffee, grilled onions, and lemon cleaner. Outside, afternoon rain blurred the traffic into red and white streaks. Thomas looked older than he had in the personnel photograph. His hair had turned almost completely gray, and deep lines framed his eyes. He placed a sealed envelope on the table, but kept one hand over it. Before I give you this, you need to understand something, he said. Adrian Cole did not ask for your family's gratitude. He did not want you to know his name. That does not make surveillance acceptable. No, Thomas said. It does not. His agreement disarmed me more than an excuse would. Have. Then tell me why he did it. Thomas removed his hand. Inside the envelope was a copy of an old security report dated October 17th, 12 years earlier. The day before my father died, Daniel Bennett had requested an emergency meeting with Adrian, who was 26 at the time and had only recently joined the executive committee. Why Adrian? I asked. Because your father believed he was the only member of the Cole family Victor had not already controlled. Thomas described a company I barely recognized. Cole Meridian had been expanding quickly, acquiring transportation firms, medical suppliers, and regional banks. Victor approved the deals. Daniel reviewed the numbers. At first, the irregularities looked small. Duplicate invoices, missing compliance reports, payments routed through consulting groups that had no employees. Then Daniel found records showing that Victor had falsified safety reports and redirected company money to protect the scheme. When employees raised concerns, they were transferred, discredited, or pressured into silence. Your father copied everything, Thomas said. He planned to take it to federal investigators. Why did he wait? Because Victor learned about the files before Daniel could deliver them. The waitress refilled my coffee. I watched the dark liquid rise inside the cup and remembered my father sitting at our kitchen table with reading glasses low on his nose, checking every household bill twice. Numbers tell you where people have been, Claire. Follow them long enough, and they tell you where they are going. The night before his death, Thomas continued, Daniel met Adrian in a parking structure beneath the old Cole Meridian offices. I was part of Adrian's security team. Your father arrived carrying a leather folder and wearing a silver watch. My gaze dropped to the report. A handwritten note appeared at the bottom. Protect Evelyn. Protect Claire. Protect Noah. What happened at the meeting? I asked. Daniel gave Adrian partial copies of the evidence. He kept the originals somewhere else. Then he told Adrian that if anything happened to him, Victor would go after his family to find them. We never had any files. Victor could not be certain of that. Thomas reached into his coat and placed a photograph on the table. It showed my father and Adrian beside a concrete pillar. My father looked exhausted. Adrian looked stunned. Between them, their hands were closed around the same silver watch. Daniel made him promise, Thomas said. Your medical care, your home, your education, your safety. Nothing extravagant. Nothing that would attract attention. Just enough to keep your family stable and difficult to pressure. I stared at my father's face until it blurred. Adrian was 26. Why would he agree to carry that for the rest of his life? Thomas looked toward the rain sliding down the diner window. Because your father saved his life in every way that mattered. He showed Adrian what Victor was turning the company into. He gave him a chance to become someone different. I left the diner with the report pressed against my chest and drove back to Cole Meridian. The executive floor was dark except for the city lights spilling through the windows. Adrian stood alone inside his office, his suit jacket draped over a chair, his tie loosened for the first time I had ever seen. He did not appear surprised when I entered. "Thomas called you," he said. "You knew he would. I hoped he would wait." I placed the photograph on his desk. "My father gave you that watch." Adrian looked at his wrist. "Yes." "And you paid for my mother's surgery." "Yes." "My brother's scholarship." "Our mortgage." "The security teams." "Yes." Each answer was quiet, unadorned. It made my anger rise faster. "You watched us for 12 years and never once thought we deserved an explanation." His jaw tightened. "An explanation would have put you in danger. You do not get to decide that for me." I already did. The honesty of it cut deeper than denial. I stepped closer to the desk. "Why did you let me testify?" For the first time, Adrian looked away. His fingers touched the scratched edge of the watch. "Because Victor needed to believe the accounts had been discovered for the wrong reason. I accused you of corruption in front of the entire country. I know. You could lose everything." He looked back at me, and the exhaustion in his face was no longer hidden. That was the point. My breath caught. "You used me. I protected you. Those are not the same thing." Silence filled the office. Far below us, horns sounded along Park Avenue. Adrian walked to the window and stopped with his back to me. "Victor has spent 12 years searching for the evidence your father hid. He believed the payments to your family were proof that I had found it. Your testimony convinced him the accounts were nothing more than my private misconduct. So now he thinks you are finished." "Yes. And the evidence is safe." Adrian turned slowly. "No, Claire." His eyes moved to the report in my hand. "The evidence was never with me." A cold understanding began to form before he finished. "Your father left it with someone Victor would never suspect." He looked directly at me. "He left it with you." For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood him. "With me?" My voice sounded small inside the enormous office. Adrian did not move from the window. "Your father believed you would recognize what the rest of us overlooked." I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny in the room. I was 18 years old when he died. You were observant. Careful. He trusted the way your mind worked. He left me nothing except a box of photographs, old tax records, and a watch that disappeared before the funeral. Adrian looked down at the silver watch on his wrist. The answer was there before he spoke. "This watch." Anger rose so quickly that my vision sharpened. "You took it." He gave it to me. "And you kept it for 12 years while my mother believed it was lost." "Because Victor knew Daniel wore it every day? If it remained with your family, he would have searched for it." I crossed the space between us and held out my hand. "Give it to me." Adrian studied my face, then unfastened the worn leather strap. He placed the watch in my palm with a care that made me even angrier. It was heavier than I remembered. The silver case was scratched near the crown, and a narrow line crossed the back where my father had dropped it while repairing our porch railing when I was 11. I ran my thumb over that mark. For one terrible second, I could smell sawdust and black coffee. I could hear my father telling Noah to stop jumping from the third step because our health insurance was already expensive enough. Then the memory vanished, leaving only Adrian's office and the man who had carried a piece of my father longer than I had. "You knew I had this?" I asked. "Daniel said the evidence would be connected to something he had already taught you to notice." "That could mean anything." "I know. So you built a plan around a guess." "I built a plan around keeping Victor from realizing there was still something to find." I closed my fingers around the watch. "And you made me part of that plan without telling me." Adrian's expression hardened, not with anger, but with the kind of control I had once mistaken for certainty. "If I had told you, Victor would have seen the change in your behavior." "You do not know how I would have behaved." "I know how closely he watches people." "That is not an answer. It is the only one I have." The city glittered behind him, all glass and headlights, beautiful from 60 floors above and merciless at street level. I thought of every decision Adrian had made for my family. The surgery, the scholarship, the mortgage, the security teams. Each act had looked like rescue from a distance. Standing beside him, It felt like a locked door painted to resemble safety. You kept us alive, I said. But you never asked how we wanted to live. Something shifted in his face. It was small, almost invisible, but I saw it. No, he said. I did not. You followed me. You investigated my friends. You tracked my mother's appointments and my brother's school records. Only when there was a credible risk. Who decided what counted as credible? He did not answer. You did, I said. Of course you did. I walked to his desk and set the security report beside the photographs. Protection without truth is just another kind of cage. Adrian remained silent. For once, his silence did not feel powerful. It felt ashamed. My phone rang before either of us spoke again. Noah's name lit the screen. I answered immediately. Are you with Mom? Yes, but something strange happened. His voice was tight. A man from the insurance company came by asking about her surgery records. I looked at Adrian. His posture changed before Noah finished the sentence. Did he give you a name? I asked. Martin Wells. Mom said she had never heard of him. When I tried calling the number on his card, it was disconnected. Adrian reached for his phone. Lock the door, I told Noah. Do not speak to anyone else. I am coming. Claire, what is going on? I will explain when I get there. Adrian was already issuing quiet instructions to Thomas. His voice was calm, but the room seemed to tighten around every word. When he ended the call, I picked up my bag. You are not coming with me. Victor moved sooner than I expected. That does not change what I said. Your mother's medical file could contain the foundation authorization. Then send security to the building and stay here. His eyes held mine. Claire, no. You do not get to turn this into another decision you make for me. He looked toward the watch in my hand. Then make the decision. The word stopped me. Adrian opened a locked drawer and removed a thick black folder. He placed it on the desk. Everything is there. Every payment. Every security assessment. Every decision I made involving your family. I stared at the folder. You are giving me access now? You asked for the truth. After 12 years. Yes. He pushed it toward me. You can terminate every protection order. You can expose every account. You can give the entire file to the committee tomorrow morning. I will not stop you. I opened the folder. The first pages contained hospital invoices and scholarship agreements. The next section held photographs, reports, and handwritten notes documenting incidents I had never known occurred. A suspicious vehicle near my mother's house. An attempt to obtain Noah's academic records. Questions asked about me at a former workplace. None described direct harm. All showed a patient pattern of pressure, observation, and intrusion. Victor had been searching without revealing what he wanted. Adrian had been watching him search. Near the back, I found a sealed evidence summary marked with my father's employee number. Adrian stepped closer, but he did not touch it. I have never opened that section, he said. Why not? The encryption key was missing. I slid the silver watch beneath the desk lamp. The second hand moved with a faint mechanical tick. My father used to say that machines always revealed how they were built if you listened long enough. I turned the crown once. Nothing happened. Twice. Still nothing. On the third turn, the back plate shifted slightly beneath my thumb. A narrow compartment opened inside the case. A tiny strip of paper rested beneath the mechanism, covered with a sequence of numbers. Adrian stared at it. That is the key. I entered the sequence into the file system. The screen flickered, then displayed a list of archived documents. Safety reports, private correspondence, transaction logs. At the center was a scanned authorization form dated 3 days before my father's death. The report approved the transfer of millions of dollars and concealed serious violations inside one of Victor's acquisitions. I expected to see Victor Hale's signature at the bottom. Instead, I saw Daniel Bennett. My father's name. My father's handwriting. My father's approval. The watch slipped from my fingers and struck the desk with a soft metallic sound. Adrian read the document over my shoulder, and for the first time since I had known him, he had no explanation ready. I stared at the signature until the letters stopped looking familiar. You told me he was trying to expose Victor, I whispered. Adrian's voice was barely audible. That is what I believed. I turned toward him. Then why did my father authorize the crime? Adrian did not answer because there was nothing he could say that would make the signature disappear. My father's name sat at the bottom of the authorization form in dark blue ink, steady and deliberate. Exactly the way he had signed my high school permission slips and birthday cards. Daniel Bennett. The man who had taught me that numbers could reveal a lie had apparently used them to create one. Open the supporting files, I said. Adrian moved toward the keyboard, but I stepped between him and the desk. I will do it. He stopped immediately. That should have made me feel in control. It did not. My hands trembled as I opened the first attachment. It was a safety review for a distribution center in northern New Jersey. The report claimed every emergency system had passed inspection. A second document showed the inspection had never occurred. A third listed a payment of $3 million to a consulting firm controlled by Victor Hale. My father had approved the transfer. I opened another file, then another. His signature appeared again and again. Each one felt like a small betrayal. How many people lost their jobs because of these reports? I asked. 27, Adrian said quietly. And you knew? I knew the division was closed after an internal review. I did not know Daniel had signed the original documents. I turned toward him. You had 12 years to investigate. I spent those years trying to keep Victor from learning what your father left behind. That sounds convenient. He accepted the accusation without defending himself. It does. I hated that answer. I wanted him to argue so I could stay angry. Instead, he stood several feet away and let me decide what to open next. Near the bottom of the file list, I found a folder labeled contingency. It required a second code. The numbers from the watch did not work. I tried my father's birthday, my mother's birthday, the address of our first house. Nothing. Then I remembered something he used to say whenever I became frustrated with homework. Never begin where the problem tells you to begin. Start where something changed. The authorization form was dated October 15th. The watch had stopped once when I was a child, and my father had reset it to 6:17 because that was the minute I had been born. I entered 617. The folder opened. Inside were time-stamped emails, building access logs, and an audio file less than 4 minutes long. I pressed play. Static filled the speakers, followed by my father's voice. Older than I remembered. More tired. If this recording is being heard, then Victor has probably used my signature exactly as I expected. I covered my mouth. Adrian lowered his eyes. My father continued. The reports are false. I signed them because Victor planned to approve them himself and move the workers before federal inspectors arrived. My signature gave me access to the transfer schedule. It also delayed the closure by 72 hours. That was enough time to move every employee out of the affected facilities and copy the original records. I stared at the screen. The timestamps confirmed it. My father had authorized the payment at 8:14 in the morning. At 8:22, he sent private relocation orders through a regional manager. By noon, the employees had been reassigned. 3 days later, Victor closed the division and blamed Daniel for the missing funds. My father's voice returned after a long pause. Claire, if you are the one hearing this, I am sorry. I know what my name will look like on paper. I also know you will look past the paper. My vision blurred. I had spent 12 years trying to honor him, and for one terrible hour, I had believed the version of him created by the very man he had tried to expose. Adrian reached toward the desk, then stopped before touching me. The restraint mattered. There is more, he said. I wiped my face and opened the final document. It was a map of financial transfers connecting Victor to the consulting firms, false inspections, and private accounts. The evidence was complete, but one section had been intentionally removed. A handwritten note explained why. The final confirmation would exist only in Victor's own records. He had to admit knowledge of the original schedule or access the hidden account himself. Without that, his attorneys could claim my father acted alone. He left a trap? I whispered. He left the outline of one, Adrian said. He expected me to finish it. No, I turned to face him. He expected me to recognize it. Adrian's expression changed. Not wounded. Not offended. He simply listened. That was new. My phone vibrated with a message from Noah. The man calling himself Martin Wells had returned to my mother's building, but Thomas had already placed security downstairs. No one had entered. Victor was applying pressure, carefully enough to deny it later. I looked at the photographs, the black folder, and the silver watch resting beneath the desk lamp. For years, Adrian had believed protection meant standing between my family and every threat. My father had believed something different. He had hidden the truth where I could find it because he trusted me to choose what happened next. Victor thinks I still believe you stole the money, I said. Yes. He thinks I am frightened and confused. Probably. then that is what he needs to keep believing. Adrian studied me. What are you planning? I am going to offer him the evidence. His posture tightened. Claire, he will assume it is a trap. Not if I tell him I found my father's signature and want to protect my family from the scandal. He may ask you to meet alone. Then I will meet him alone. No. The word came instantly, sharp enough to reveal the man he had been for 12 years. I waited. Adrian closed his eyes briefly, then corrected himself. I do not think that is safe. That is different. It is also true. You can advise me. You can tell me what you know. You cannot decide for me. He looked at the watch, then at the folder in my hands. Understood. It was the first promise he made to me instead of for me. I copied the files to an encrypted drive and placed it inside my coat. Adrian gave me Victor's private number without asking what I intended to say. The office felt quieter as I dialed. Victor answered after 2 rings with the warm, patient voice I remembered from my father's memorial. Claire, he said, I wondered when you would call. I looked through the glass wall at the city below, then at Adrian standing behind me, powerful enough to control thousands of people, and finally, choosing not to control one. I found what my father hid, I said. Victor stopped breathing for half a second. It was enough. And I think we should make a deal. Victor chose the executive dining room at Cole Meridian for our meeting, which told me almost everything I needed to know about him. He wanted familiar walls, familiar staff, and a view from the 58th floor that made the city look small enough to own. I arrived at 7 the next morning carrying a slim leather folder and the silver watch in my coat pocket. Adrian was nowhere in sight. That had been my condition. Victor stood beside the windows in a navy suit, pouring coffee as if we were meeting to discuss quarterly earnings. You have your father's sense of timing, he said. He also waited until the last possible moment. I sat without accepting the cup. My father signed the authorization forms. Victor's expression softened with practiced sympathy. I am sorry you had to discover that. You knew. Daniel was a complicated man. He was either guilty or he was not. Victor took the chair across from me. People in our position rarely receive choices that clean. Our position. He said it as if we belonged to the same private world now. 2 sensible people discussing how to bury an inconvenient truth. I placed the folder on the table. I do not care about Cole Meridian. I care about my mother and my brother. Of course. Their names stay out of the investigation. My father's role remains sealed. In return, you get the files. Victor looked at the folder, but did not reach for it. Adrian put you up to this. Adrian allowed me to accuse him in front of the country. I am not protecting him. That much was true. The best lies, my father once told me, were facts arranged in the wrong order. Victor leaned back and studied me. What exactly did Daniel leave? Payment schedules, private account numbers, safety reports, and an audio statement. His fingers stopped against the coffee cup. An audio statement? He explained why he signed the documents. And where is it now? Somewhere you cannot reach unless we have an agreement. The warmth disappeared from Victor's face. For one brief second, I saw the man beneath the memorial speeches and patient smiles. Not cruel, not loud, simply certain that every person had a price and every truth could be converted into leverage. Your father made the same mistake, he said. He believed evidence had value by itself. Does it not? Evidence only matters when someone powerful decides to use it. Then why have you spent 12 years searching for it? Silence. A small one. Enough. I kept my hands still beneath the table while the recording device inside my watch captured every word. Thomas had rebuilt the mechanism overnight. Adrian had suggested 3 backup systems, then stopped himself and asked which one I wanted. It was a small change, but I noticed it. Victor rose and walked toward the window. Daniel authorized those transfers because he understood the alternative. The acquisition had to close. The reports had to be approved. A few employees were reassigned. No one was harmed. You knew the reports were false. I knew they were manageable. You knew my father moved the employees before the inspection. Victor turned. He delayed the schedule without permission. He nearly destroyed a transaction worth hundreds of millions of dollars. There it was. Knowledge he could not have possessed if my father had acted alone. I let several seconds pass before standing. Thank you. His eyes narrowed. For what? The conference room doors opened. Federal investigators entered first, followed by committee counsel and 2 members of the board. Adrian came last. He remained near the doorway, his expression unreadable. Victor looked at the watch in my hand, then at me. You recorded this. I gave you the opportunity to tell the truth. You think this clears Adrian? No, I said. It reveals you. The second hearing began that afternoon. I returned to the same chair, beneath the same white lights, with the same microphone waiting in front of me. This time, I did not speak from partial records or carefully constructed assumptions. I explained every account: the medical trust, the scholarship, the security contracts, the funds Adrian had concealed to protect my family, and the employees my father had moved out of danger. I also explained what Adrian had done wrong. He had withheld evidence. He had manipulated the investigation. He had made decisions for people who never gave him permission. When the committee asked whether I believed his intentions excused his actions, I looked directly at him. No, good intentions do not remove accountability. They only explain what must change. Adrian did not look betrayed. He looked relieved. Victor's recorded admission completed the financial trail. My father's audio statement established the timeline. By evening, the board removed Victor as chairman and turned over the remaining records to federal authorities. Adrian was cleared of theft, but before anyone could declare him victorious, he stood and announced that he was stepping down as chief executive officer during the independent review. Reporters shouted questions as he left. He answered none of them. He did not ask me to follow. 3 weeks passed before I saw him again. My mother was safe at home. Noah had learned the truth about his scholarship and spent 2 days furious before admitting he would have accepted it anyway. The security contracts had been transferred to our family, and we terminated most of them. For the first time in years, no dark sedan waited across from my apartment. The absence felt strange. Then it felt like freedom. I found Adrian in his empty office late on a Friday afternoon. The artwork was gone. The shelves were bare. Only the city remained beyond the glass. The silver watch rested on the desk beside a letter from my father and a document transferring control of the remaining protection fund to my mother. You left without saying goodbye, I said. Adrian turned from the window. He looked different without the authority of the company surrounding him. Not smaller, more human. I thought you deserved a life that did not require my permission. That was not your decision either. A faint, surprised smile touched his face. No, it was not. I picked up the watch. Are you planning to disappear? If that is what you want. Stop asking what I want only after you have already chosen the ending. His gaze held mine, but he did not move closer. Then tell me how this ends. I thought about the man I had testified against, the man who had protected my family, and the man who had finally accepted that protection was not the same as love. It does not end here, I said. But from now on, we write it together. He had spent 12 years standing between my family and every danger he could see. Loving me began when he finally stepped aside and trusted me to choose where I stood.